The cameras swept across the packed America's Got Talent auditorium, capturing thousands of eager faces glowing beneath the sea of brilliant stage lights. It was the kind of night when dreams were born or shattered within the span of a few trembling heartbeats. A night of noise, excitement, and breathtaking anticipation. Backstage, crew members hurriedly adjusted microphones. Stagehands rolled heavy equipment past contestants pacing nervously, and judges reviewed notes between auditions. Everything buzzed with energy, everything dazzled with spectacle. But then, something shifted. The next contestant didn't stride onto the stage with flashy confidence. She didn't wave dramatically or smile for the cameras. Instead, she stepped out almost shyly, so quietly that the crowd barely noticed until the spotlight landed on her. A thin teenage girl, no older than 17, wearing a faded gray hoodie that hung awkwardly off her shoulders. The sleeves were too long, covering almost half her palms. Her black jeans had been washed so many times the color had turned chalky, and her shoes looked like they had walked far more life than her years implied. She wasn't glamorous. She wasn't bold. She wasn't the kind of contestant anyone expected to shock the world. And yet there was something about her, a trembling determination in the way she held her hands. A quiet storm brewing behind her nervous eyes, a story heavy enough to make her chest rise and fall as though each breath carried a piece of the past. She walked slowly to the center of the stage, clutching a slightly crumpled piece of sheet music. It was obvious the page had been handled dozens of times, soft at the edges, swollen from old tears, and covered in faint pencil markings that looked almost like whispers pressed into paper. When she reached the center spot, she didn't immediately raise her head. She stood still, as though the silence itself weighed on her shoulders. It took her 3 trembling seconds before she finally looked up to face the judges. The crowd took notice. Sophia leaned forward with a gentle smile. Heidi whispered something to Howie. Simon, who had been casually scanning through a judge's folder, lowered his hand and looked up, brow arched, attention captured. Then came the softest voice of the night. Hi. My name is Maya. Maya Alvarez. The microphone barely picked up her words. She cleared her throat and tried again, forcing herself to lift her chin higher. She inhaled slowly. I'm 16 years old. And I'm going to play an original piano piece. As soon as she said original, the audience rustled. Original pieces were a gamble, especially coming from someone who looked as fragile as a candle in the wind. Sophia responded warmly. That's beautiful. What's the name of your piece, sweetheart? Maya's fingers tightened on the sheet music, her knuckles turning pale. It's called Her Hands. The title hung in the air, curious and haunting. How lovely, Heidi said. And who is her? Maya looked down for a moment, blinking rapidly. When she looked back up, her eyes shimmered under the stage lights. My mom. The theater fell still, an unexpected hush washing across the seats. Simon, always alert to emotional authenticity, leaned closer, resting his arms on the table. Tell us a little about her, he said gently, not in his usual sharp tone, but in one that almost sounded careful. Maya breathed out shakily. She was a night cleaner. She worked here, at ACT. Years ago. That single sentence struck the judges like a soft shockwave. A few members of the audience gasped. A camera quickly panned to the backstage area, where several longtime crew members paused and exchanged looks. Maya continued, voice cracking but growing stronger with each word. She would clean the theater floors while rehearsals were going on. She said she felt like the music made the building come alive, and every morning, when she came home, she'd tell me about the songs she heard, the performances she watched from the side. She swallowed hard. She told me that talent doesn't come from where you start. It comes from how hard you dream. She always said that one day I would play on a stage like this, that one day I would be heard. The crowd leaned forward, breath held. Simon's expression softened, a rare occurrence. What happened to her? He asked slowly. Maya's lips trembled. The words barely made it out. She passed away last year. A wave of emotion swept through the auditorium, some gasps, some whispered reactions, some silent hands instinctively placed over hearts. I'm so sorry, Sophia said gently, placing a hand over her chest. Maya nodded, wiping her cheek quickly as though she didn't want to be seen crying. That's why I'm here, she whispered. I'm here to play her story. To play what she never got to tell the world herself. There was no dramatic swell of music, no sudden lights, yet the moment felt monumental, as if the entire theater suddenly understood that this wasn't an ordinary audition. This was grief. This was love. This was a child carrying the legacy of a parent who had scrubbed floors under the same lights that now shone on her daughter. The audience sensed it. The judges felt it. Even the camera seemed to slow as though honoring the gravity of her presence. Simon cleared his throat. "Maya," he said softly, "I want you to take your time. And when you're ready, we're listening." She nodded, wiping her palms nervously on her jeans before turning toward a sleek black grand piano sitting alone on the stage. With every step she took toward it, the vastness of the theater seemed to shrink, until the world narrowed into a single moment that stood between her and the memory of her mother. She placed the sheet music on the stand. Though she didn't look at it, she sat down, exhaling shakily, feeling the coldness of the polished piano bench beneath her. Her reflection stared back at her from the glossy surface of the keys, small, fragile, but determined. Before she began, she whispered so softly the mic almost didn't catch it, "This is for you, Mama." Lights dimmed. The room held its breath, and Simon Cowell, who rarely leaned forward unless something extraordinary was coming, did exactly that. "This," he murmured, "I want to hear." Long before Maya Alvarez stood beneath the glittering lights of the AGT stage, her world was shaped by dim hallway, second-hand furniture, and the soft, steady rhythm of her mother's footsteps coming home before sunrise. They lived in a modest, one-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor of a building that always smelled faintly of detergent and boiled rice. The paint on their door was chipped, the carpet in the hall had worn thin. At night the pipes clanked like restless spirits, but inside their apartment was something stronger than comfort, something money could never buy. Love, warm, honest, unconditional love. A mother's sacrifice. Maya's mother, Isabella Alvarez, worked 2 jobs for most of Maya's childhood. During the day, she worked at a laundromat down the street. At night, she took the bus to downtown Los Angeles to clean the AG Theater, the same theater Maya would one day stand inside as a performer. Every evening at 6:30 p.m., she'd tie her hair into a neat bun, slip on her faded blue cleaning uniform, and say the same thing. "I'm sorry, Mija. I'll be home late. Be safe. And don't forget to smile, even when no one is watching." Maya would nod and hug her tightly, burying her face in the familiar scent of detergent and jasmine lotion. The door would close, and Maya would be alone again. Alone but never lonely, because she had the one gift her mother had sacrificed so much to give her, the keyboard that saved her when Maya was 8. Isabella did something extraordinary, even reckless, considering their finances. She spent $20 at a neighbor's garage sale on an old electronic keyboard. One corner of it was cracked, some keys stuck, and released with a delayed bounce. The speakers hissed whenever Maya pressed more than 3 notes at once, but when Isabella brought it inside, her smile shone like sunrise. "I know it isn't new," she admitted softly, "but, Mija, you always listen to music on the radio with such light in your eyes. I wanted you to have something of your own." Maya touched the keyboard gently, as if it were a treasure. "You bought this for me?" she asked, eyes wide. "For us," Isabella corrected with a wink. "I want to see what magic you can make." And from that night onward the apartment filled with sound. Tentative notes at first, random rhythms, choppy melodies, but day by day, hour by hour, Maya grew. While other kids played in the courtyard or watched cartoons past dinner, Maya sat with her back straight, her little fingers trying again and again. Her music became her companion, her comfort, her journal, her dream. And whenever Isabella returned home after a long night shift, exhausted, shoulder heavy, eyes rimmed in red, she would always pause before entering the apartment, because through the thin door she could hear her daughter playing. And for a moment, the tiredness melted. Stories from the stage. Some mornings Isabella arrived home still energized, not because the work was easy, but because she had stories to tell. "Mija, you won't believe it," she'd whisper excitedly as she slipped off her shoes. "Yesterday I saw a band rehearse. They had lights everywhere, blue, red, gold. The singer had a voice like honey. When he hit the high notes, I swear the whole room vibrated." Maya would sit beside her with wide, shining eyes. "Did he smile at you?" "No," Isabella laughed. "Nobody notices the woman with the mop bucket, Mija, but I notice them. I learn from them." She'd tap Maya's forehead softly. "And you will learn from me." Other nights, she shared smaller stories, a dancer accidentally slipping and laughing it off, a comedian writing jokes on napkins backstage, a nervous teenager practicing lines under her breath in the hallway. Each story filled Maya's imagination until she could picture the theater perfectly, the massive stage, the bright lights, the velvet curtains sweeping like waves. and her mother mopping quietly behind them. Sometimes Isabella confessed one day, looking out the window, I pretend I'm up there. Even for a second, just to feel what it's like to be seen. Maya had climbed onto her lap, wrapping her arms around her. One day I'll be on that stage, she promised fiercely. And I'll make you proud. I'll play the piano and people will love it, and you won't have to work anymore. Isabella had smiled through tears. You already make me proud, every single day. The illness that changed everything but dreams, no matter how bright, often meet shadows. Isabella's cough started quietly, a little wheeze here, a small pause there. She brushed it off, saying it was dust from the theater, or the cold morning air, but weeks passed. Then months. The cough grew. Sometimes her breath caught suddenly, forcing her to lean against a wall, until it passed. Maya noticed. Mama, you're tired. Just a long night, Mija. Mama, your chest hurts. Only a little. Mama, please go to the doctor. But the truth was cruel. Doctors cost money they didn't have. And Isabella was too proud, too scared to admit she needed help. The night she collapsed in the kitchen, Maya screamed for help. Neighbors rushed in, dialing emergency services. The ambulance took her mother away with flashing lights painting the apartment walls in blue and red. That night, the sirens carried away not just Isabella's breath, but Maya's entire world. A promise and a piano. The hospital room smelled of bleach and faint sadness. Machines beeped steadily. Isabella's hand felt colder than Maya remembered. Don't cry, Isabella whispered weakly. My sweet girl, don't cry. Maya sobbed into her mother's palm. Mama, you said you'd be in the front row when I played on a big stage. A single tear escaped Isabella's eye. I will be, she whispered, her voice thin as a feather. Just not the way we imagined. She lifted her trembling hand, and placed it over Maya's heart. Every time you play, Maida, I'll be right here. Your music will carry me. Those were her last words. After she was gone, Maya clung to the keyboard. Sometimes she played until sunrise, sometimes she pressed her forehead against the keys and cried, and sometimes, when the apartment was silent, heavy, and dark, she felt her mother's hands guiding hers. The invitation life grew harder after that. Bills piled up. Grief weighed down every corner of the room. But then on an afternoon when her hope was at its lowest, an envelope arrived. A plain envelope, with the AGT logo on the corner. Her hands shook as she opened it. Congratulations, Maya Alvarez. You have been selected for an audition. Her breath caught. Her mother's dream. Her mother's theater. Her mother's stage. The place where Isabella had cleaned floors, carried buckets, and hummed quietly in the shadows. Now her daughter would walk into the light, not for fame, not for glory, but for love, for her mother, for the promise she made in a hospital room that still echoed with unspoken dreams. The moment Maya's fingers touched the piano keys, the theater fell into a silence so deep, it felt as though the very walls were holding their breath. Her hands trembled slightly, not from nerves, but from the weight of everything they carried. Nights of loneliness, mornings of grief, afternoons of relentless practice, and years of watching her mother sacrifice everything so Maya could chase a dream neither of them dared to say aloud. She pressed the first note. A soft, aching tone, a whisper of sound that fluttered gently across the auditorium like a small bird hesitant to leave the nest. People leaned in instinctively. Even those sitting in the highest balcony felt their hearts tighten. The second note followed, then the third. Before long, the music began to unfurl slowly, carefully, like a fragile memory being rewritten into something beautiful. A melody born in darkness. The piece didn't sound like typical AGT showmanship. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud. It wasn't meant to impress with speed or complexity. Instead, it felt intimate, personal, as though Maya were letting the audience read pages from her soul. The left hand played a soft, steady rhythm, a heartbeat, her mother's heartbeat. Tired, but steady. Weak at times, but always present, always pushing forward. The right hand painted a delicate melody above it, childlike, curious, filled with little leaps and gentle falls. It was the kind of melody that sounded like the laughter of a little girl playing in a one-bedroom apartment, or the echo of hope in an empty room. The judges exchanged glances. Simon sat completely still, eyes fixed on Maya's hands. Sophia's eyes softened, glistening with emotion. Howie had placed his pen down, realizing that whatever was happening deserved his full attention. But the audience, they didn't just listen. They felt an unexpected reaction in the middle of the front row. sat a man in his late 60s wearing a faded black, egged crew jacket. It had been years since he'd worn it, and even longer since he'd stepped inside the theater. His name was Alfredo, a retired janitor who had worked with Isabella for over a decade. When Maya began the second section of her piece, a gentle rise in the melody, something reminiscent of footsteps, echoing in polished corridors, his mouth fell open, because he recognized it. Not the song itself, but the rhythm. The way the notes ascended and descended mimicked something familiar. It sounded exactly like the way Isabella used to hum while she mopped the floors. Alfredo's eyes widened with disbelief. "That's her," he whispered to the woman beside him. "That's Bella's humming." The woman turned toward him, confused, but before she could reply, the music shifted. The gentle humming-like motif gave way to a softer, heavier sequence of notes, slow, struggling, breathlike. Maya's shoulders curled inward slightly as she played, as though she were reliving the moment her mother's breath grew shallow in the hospital room. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she didn't falter. The music thickened, grew darker. The heartbeat. Left hand grew uneven, as though her mother's strength were fading. The right hand reached upward with notes that sounded like pleas, hopes, promises made in desperation. The entire theater was silent. And then, just when the melody felt like it might collapse, a light emerged. The twist. A hidden memory revealed through music. The melody suddenly shifted into something warmer, something almost luminous. This time, it wasn't a memory of sadness. It wasn't grief, or fear, or loss. It was Isabella herself, in all her gentle beauty. Maya played the notes her mother had once tapped on the table absent-mindedly while folding laundry. A melodic habit, a tiny rhythm she used to comfort herself during long nights. But the twist wasn't the familiar rhythms. It was what happened next. Maya wove into her music the exact phrase her mother used to hum when she thought Maya was asleep. The soft lullaby she never fully finished, because she always drifted off halfway through. The audience didn't know the significance. But the AGT crew did, especially the older members, those who had worked the night shifts. Gasps rose from the back of the room. People covered their mouths. Some of the crew who stood near the curtains, watching through the gaps, began to cry, because they recognized the tune. It was Isabella's lullaby, the same one she used to hum quietly as she polished the railings and dusted the backstage lights. They had heard it hundreds of times over the years, but had never known where it came from. Now they knew. It had been passed from mother to daughter. A melody of love. A melody of sacrifice. A melody that had traveled from the shadows of backstage to the brightest stage in the world. Simon's realization. Simon Cowell wasn't an emotional judge. He wasn't known for crying. He wasn't known for leaning into sentimentality. But even he felt something crack inside him, because as he watched Maya, her trembling hands, her hunched shoulders, her tear-streaked face, he suddenly remembered something. Years ago, during rehearsals for another season, he recalled seeing a woman quietly sweeping the corner of the stage while humming a soft, haunting tune. At the time he had barely noticed. A fleeting moment in a busy day. But now, listening to Maya, the memory hit him like a wave. It was the same tune. A chill ran down Simon's spine. He sat up, eyes widening, breath catching. This wasn't just a performance. This wasn't just a tribute. This was Isabella's story, told through the hands of her daughter. The theater itself reacts as Maya moved into the final section of her piece. Something extraordinary happened. The entire theater seemed to transform. The usual bright stage lights dimmed until the room felt like twilight. The screens behind her displayed soft golden glows, as if the stage were rising into a heaven of warm light. People in the audience glanced around, feeling something they couldn't explain. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't grief. It was presence. A presence so gentle, so familiar that even Maya felt it. Her hands, still trembling earlier, now steadied as though someone were guiding her fingers with warm, invisible hands. The final notes rang out, soft and trembling, like a goodbye whispered in the wind. And when the last note faded, Maya dropped her hands into her lap and sobbed. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet, broken honesty of a child who missed her mother more than words could ever say. The audience rose to their feet. But Simon didn't move. Instead, he stood up slowly, abruptly, pushing back his chair so fast, it startled the room. Then he walked toward the stage. A judge had never done that. Mid-audition. The crowd gasped. Camera operators scrambled. Sophia covered her mouth. Maya looked up, breath hitching, and Simon said the words that would change everything. I knew your mother. The theater had never been this silent. It was a silence that didn't simply fall over the room, it settled, heavy and trembling, as though every single person in the crowd knew something sacred was unfolding before their eyes. And on that massive act stage, surrounded by lights brighter than anything she had ever known, stood a 17-year-old girl whose hands were suddenly cold and shaking. Maria Alvarez, the cleaner's daughter. Her breath came out uneven, like little pieces of her heart were breaking free each time she exhaled. She gently placed her trembling fingers over the piano keys. Though she tried to hide it, her eyes glistened under the lights, not from fear, not entirely, but from everything that had led her to this very moment. Behind the stage curtains, her mother watched with her mop still in hand, the same mop she had used minutes earlier to wipe the floors. Maria now stood above. She didn't make a sound. She just held the mop to her chest and whispered a prayer in Spanish, voice cracking with hope. Go, mi niña, make them feel what I couldn't. Meanwhile, in the judges' panel, something unusual was happening. Simon Cowell, who just minutes earlier had stood up and left after hearing her story, was now rushing back in, breathless, adjusting his shirt collar as though he had run miles instead of backstage corridors. When he finally reached his seat, the entire audience murmured in surprise. Simon didn't acknowledge them. His eyes were fixed on Maria like hers were the last story he needed to understand. There was a strange emotion in his face, not skepticism, not evaluation, but genuine concern, as if something in her story had touched a thread deep inside him. He leaned forward, hands clasped. Take your time, he said softly. Maria nodded once, her lips trembled, and then she began to play. The first note, it wasn't loud, it wasn't forceful, it wasn't dramatic. It was gentle, almost fragile, as though the note itself was unsure if it belonged in such a grand place. But it did. The melody blossomed slowly, like a flower that had waited too long for spring. Her fingers, though cold and nervous, moved with the memory of countless nights spent on a broken piano, in a dusty janitor's closet. Every key she touched carried a story, a memory, a piece of her mother's sacrifice. The audience leaned in without realizing it, drawn toward her like tides to the moon. They didn't understand the melody yet, but they felt it, the mix of longing, gratitude, childhood promise, and quiet pain. It was music, written not with ink, but with life. Maria's world unfolds in sound. The stage lights softened as she moved in. The second movement, her confidence growing like a flame fed with oxygen. The melody shifted, warmer now, fuller, echoing the laughter she once shared with her mother during rare moments of rest, the hope she felt the day she discovered the old piano, the countless hours she practiced even when her fingers ached and her stomach growled from skipped meals. Every rise in melody was a dream. Every fall was a reminder of the struggles they endured. The judges exchanged glances, their expressions stunned. How could someone so young play with such emotional depth? Such honesty. Simon pressed a hand to his mouth. Something inside him was unraveling. A sudden break in the music, then mid-phrase Maria's fingers froze. A gasp rippled through the audience. Her breath caught. Her shoulders tightened. For a moment, she looked like a bird that had flown too high and suddenly realized how far the ground was below. She blinked rapidly as her vision blurred with tears. Not now. Not here. Not after everything. Her chest began to rise and fall too quickly. Her thoughts scattered. Her old fear, the one that had always whispered that she didn't belong among people born to opportunity, came roaring back, louder than the applause that had welcomed her. But before panic could crush her completely, Maria heard something. A voice. Soft. Trembling. Familiar. Estoy contigo, mi niña. Her mother. She was whispering from backstage, pressing a hand against the curtain, as though touching her daughter through it. I'm right here with you. Maria steadied her breath. Her mother had swept halls her whole life. She had scrubbed stains no one thanked her for. She had worked until her spine curved and her fingers cracked. Also her daughter could dream beyond what she had ever been allowed to imagine. This moment wasn't just Maria's. It was theirs. She closed her eyes and began again. The transformation, the final section of her piece, was unlike anything the room had heard. It was bolder, brighter, fierce with purpose. Her fingers danced, really danced, gliding across the keys like they had shed years of fear in an instant. Her melody climbed and climbed, reaching higher and higher, building into something magnificent. People began to cry quietly at first, then openly. A woman in the third row covered her mouth, tears dripping down her wrist. A teenager, near the back, wiped his eyes with his sleeve. A man who had come only to accompany his children found his throat tightening unexpectedly. Maria wasn't just playing music, she was giving the world a glimpse of a moment she had once kept hidden: the janitor's closet, the broken piano, the saving grace of her mother's faith, the silent promise she had whispered into her palms, "One day, Mama, I will play so the world hears us." And now they were hearing. All of them. The final note, the ending, came softly just as it had begun. A single, delicate note lingered in the air like a breath held too long. Maria's hands fell to her lap. Her shoulders dropped. Tears finally slid down her cheeks. The room was frozen. No clapping. No cheering. No movement. Just awe. Then, a sound cracked through the silence. A hand on the judge's panel. Simon Cowell had stood up so suddenly that his chair slid backward. His eyes were wet. He didn't blink. He didn't smile. He simply whispered, "That wasn't music." He paused, voice trembling. That was a love letter. The audience erupted: cheers, shouts, sobs, applause crashing like a tidal wave. People stood, rising as one, witnessing a moment they knew they'd never forget. Maria covered her face with her hands, overwhelmed. And backstage, her mother collapsed to her knees, mop still clutched again, her chest crying into her palms, her heart bursting with pride. At that exact moment, something extraordinary happened. As confetti began to fall, Simon reached forward. His hand hovered over the table. And then, he slammed the golden buzzer. Gold rained from the heavens, swirling around Maria like the universe itself was crowning her. The cleaner's daughter had just changed her life, with a piano rescued from a closet, and with a love story written from a mother's sacrifice. Gold shimmered through the air, long after the buzzer had been pressed, swirling around Maria in soft, glowing waves. Spectators were still on their feet, clapping and cheering as though their applause might lift the girl right off the stage. Maria stood in the center of it all, hands trembling against her lips, her heart thundering so loudly she could barely hear anything else. It didn't feel real. None of it. Minutes ago, she had walked out, as the daughter of a cleaner, nervous, unsure, hoping only to be heard. And now she was standing beneath golden confetti, crying tears she hadn't even realized she'd been holding for years. Her knees weakened, her breath caught, and the stage suddenly felt too big, too bright, too overwhelming. Then she heard footsteps. Quick, light, familiar. "Mi niña!" Her mother burst onto the stage from backstage, ignoring every rule, every cue, every security guard trying to guide her back. She was still holding the mop, her old worn mop, which now bumped against her leg as she ran. The audience saw her. The judges saw her. Millions at home would eventually see her. But to Maria, it was just her mama, tear-streaked, breathless, overwhelmed with pride. She threw her arms around Maria, pulling her close so tightly that Maria could feel her mother's heartbeat pounding against her own. They shook together, mother and daughter, two halves of the same story, finally standing where neither had ever imagined they'd be. "Mama," Maria whispered, voice thick with emotion. "We did it." Her mother cupped her face, her rough hands trembling. "No, no, my love, you did this. All of this." She touched Maria's wrist, the same hand that had learned to create beauty on broken keys. "I only cleaned floors. You built a world." "No," Maria said softly. "You gave me the floor to stand on." Her mother's breath hitched. The audience, watching the exchange on the massive screens, fell silent again, this time, not from shock, but from the unmistakable pull of witnessing pure, unconditional love. Simon approaches from the judge's table. Simon Cowell stood again, slowly this time, as though every step held weight. He made his way onto the stage, ignoring the confetti sticking to his shoes and jacket. When he reached them, he paused. He didn't speak right away. He didn't flash a TV smile. He didn't adopt the posture of a celebrity or a judge. He simply stood there, hands gently clasped, looking at Maria and her mother with an expression the audience wasn't used to seeing on his face, a mix of admiration and something like regret. Finally, he cleared his throat. "I want to say something," he began, his voice softer than usual, not as a judge but as someone who believes deeply in stories. Maria wiped her tears, waiting. "When I walked out earlier," he continued, "it wasn't because I didn't want to hear you. I left because your story reminded me of someone I knew long ago. Someone who never got her chance." He exhaled slowly. "And I wasn't going to miss your moment." The audience murmured, emotional. Simon looked at her again, this time with the certainty of a man who had just witnessed something life-changing. "What you played today," he said, "wasn't just a performance. It was a gift. You brought the world into your heart, without using a single word." Maria blinked back tears. "Thank you, sir." And, Simon added, glancing at her mother, "I hope you both understand something important. This is not the end of your story. This is the beginning." Maria's mother pressed a hand to her mouth, unable to stop crying. A dream they never spoke aloud after the show. Backstage was a whirlwind, producers rushing by, assistants handing out water bottles, cameras flashing, microphones pressing close. But in the chaos, Maria and her mother found a quiet corner. Maria sat down on a crate, dress still sparkling with stray bits of confetti. Her mother knelt in front of her and gently tugged off her daughter's shoes so her feet could rest. "Mama, you don't have to." "Hush," her mother said with a smile, wiping Maria's tears with her thumbs. "You have walked so far today." Maria laughed softly, the kind of laugh that comes from a heart finally free of fear. As the bustle continued around them, her mother took a deep breath. "I've wanted to tell you something for years," she began. Maria frowned. "What is it?" Her mother looked down at her hands, the same hands that had cleaned offices, schools, theaters, even this building. "When your father left, I promised myself I would give you something he never gave us." Maria leaned in. "What?" "A life without limits," she whispered. "Not even the limits of money, or education, or status. I wanted you to dream without asking permission." Maria felt tears rising again. "But I was afraid," her mother admitted, "afraid that my world, the world of mops, and gloves, and aching backs, would pull you down instead of lifting you up." Maria reached for her mother's hands. "Your world made me. It made me strong." Her mother's breath shook. "Do you mean that?" "With everything I am," Maria said. A stranger steps forward as they spoke. A woman approached them, a tall producer with a warm smile, and a clipboard tucked under her arm. "Maria," she said gently, "I want you to know something important." Maria wiped her face, nodding. "We've had thousands of performers walk through our doors," the woman continued. "But tonight, you didn't just perform. You connected. With the judges, with the audience, with every person watching at home." She kneeled down so she was eye level with Maria. "And because of that, several organizations' music programs, piano foundations, and even a few private donors have reached out to offer you a full scholarship to study music professionally." Maria froze, her eyes widened. Her mother's hands flew to her face. "A scholarship?" Maria whispered. "Yes," the producer said. "Full support. Tuition, instruments, housing, everything." Maria's mother covered her mouth as her legs nearly gave out again. "This is your moment," the producer added. "Don't be afraid to take it." Maria felt something warm bloom in her chest, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and disbelief. "Mama," she whispered. Her mother pulled her into a tight hug. "You see?" she said, voice trembling. "Your music was never meant to stay hidden. The world was waiting for you." The final transformation that night, after interviews and photos and a celebration that felt like a dream, Maria and her mother stepped outside into the cool Los Angeles air. The street was quiet, a gentle contrast to the roaring applause still echoing in their memories. Maria watched her mother lean against the railing, looking up at the night sky. "You okay?" Maria asked softly. Her mother nodded. "Just thinking." "About what?" Her mother pointed upward. "About how far we've climbed, and how far you will now go." Maria wrapped her arm around her. "We'll go together," her mother smiled through tears. "Always." They stood that way for a long moment, the city lights flickering below them, like tiny stars trying their best to shine as bright as Maria's future. And as they walked down the steps hand in hand, something extraordinary happened. People, strangers, began to recognize her. "Hey, you're the girl from ACT. That piano performance. Wow. You made me cry. You made my daughter want to learn music again. You inspired us." Maria didn't know what to say. She just smiled, shy but glowing, and thanked each person with sincerity, because she knew what it meant to be unseen. And now she knew what it meant to shine. A heart filled with light. Later that night, before going to bed in their tiny apartment, Maria placed her hand on the old, cracked piano they had rescued years ago. She didn't cry this time. Instead, she whispered, "Thank you." Then she added, "We did it." Behind her, her mother stood quietly in the doorway, smiling with pride deeper than any ocean. For the first time in their lives, their dreams weren't something distant. They were right there, within reach, growing, rising, becoming. And all of it began with a cleaner's daughter, a girl who believed in a mother's love, and a piano that the world had once forgotten. Closing message: thank you for reading this story. If it touched your heart, let it inspire one small act of kindness today. a smile, a helping hand, a word of encouragement. You never know whose life might change because of it.